Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Morrigan. Tam's next waking thoughts was something he wanted to put back where he got them. They hurt bad, and he shook. Cold seeped in through his skin and made his bones brittle. Nothing prepared him for this. They'd hung him from his wrist. It looked like and smelled like a basement. His feet were bound at the ankles with chains, and only his toes, if he pointed them, brushed the floor. A few bulbs hung from the ceiling, illuminating the room. Tam still couldn't speak or really control his movements. Just small things like making sure his head rested against his arms and didn't drop forward, so the only things he saw were his feet and the floor, and pointing his toes. A dull ache plagued his muscles along his shoulders and neck as he swayed. His body was little more than a connect the dots of bruises and cuts where they'd taken turns striking him with their pipes. And with each hit, the pain intensified, so much that the impact of the hit wasn't what hurt, but the touch of the pipe against his bare skin. His ankle burned where the pipe had damaged it. Missing a month of step dancing was the least of his worries right now. They'd left him alone again, for a while, but he knew that questions would start again. Where is it? How do you make it shift? We'll end your pain if you just give us the secret. And Tam hated that if he knew what it was they were after, he'd have given it to them long before he got to this point. He was little more than a isolated inland in an ocean of pain. If he moved the right way, he could see his attackers huddled over the contents of his backpack and the drum. They treated the botherain as if it were gold. What frightened Tam the most wasn't death so much as what he kept seeing as the instrument of his whole demise. He thought that when he came to again, he'd see them as people, just regular people, beating up on kids. But when they all removed their hoods, they all looked like trolls. They varied from the size of their tusks to the size of their horns. Some horns curled back to meet their pointed ears, while others stuck straight up before they sloped backward. Their features were different. He'd had long enough to look into their faces and memorize them. Their skin tones were different, shades of grey, just slate grey. I'm hallucinating, I'm dying, and my mind wants me to think I was killed by mythical creatures from fantasies, so I won't be so upset to die at 22. That's it. That's got to be it. Because if this is real, the big one, called Magnus, moved from the table, and then he strolled over to Tam. He made sure Tam could see his face. I'll admit, you've held up longer than the others, but we know it's you, Tamlin. You can see us for what we are, and only the unseelie can do that. Tam hadn't been able to talk the entire time, not with the toque around his neck. He simply stared mute and waited for the blows to start. He tensed when Magnus reached out to him, but he didn't strike. The troll took off the talk, and as he pulled it away, Tam could see what it looked like. He'd seen them before, in museums and at the local Renaissance fair. Now and then, a semicircle of metal carved like the heads of two dragons, with the same tail facing each other. That simple half-circle of iron is what kept me helpless, he questions to himself. Not that removing it did him any good or any favours. The volume of pain increased by 1,000, and he moaned. He couldn't stop himself. It was odd to hear his voice again, especially in so much pain. The talk dulls the pain as well as your wits. It's what keeps the unseelie in line. You have one more chance to tell me where it is. Tam Lin. Tam took in several deep breaths and used that opportunity to look around. He took in more of his surroundings. He was pretty sure they were in a basement. He just didn't know where, and he didn't know if the stairs on his right led up to the house or perhaps a business, and if he were at all successful at getting out, where would he go? He was pretty sure the ankle had swollen and was unusable. My name, he said, as he witnessed again the trolls, and that made him wince. But that was more the damage to his chest that interfered with his breathing. It's Tamburlaine Kirkpatrick, not Tam Lin. Magnus struck his face. It was a good hard knock against his temple. Tam saw stars and his body swayed back and forth from the impact. The pain won't stop until you tell us how to shift it. Tam tasted blood and spat it out. A tooth was loose. What are you looking for? I don't know what it is. He expected another blow, and he got it, this time. He blacked out for a few seconds before the shock of cold water woke him. He reacted to it and then screamed out as his body answered in pain. If the Morrigan takes you, your life will be much harder. We can give you peace, kill you, and burn the body. You will never have to be one of the bonded. Tam had no idea what that meant. He'd heard them talk about this Morrigan, and he knew the name from Folklore, but that's what she was, a myth. But then again, I'm talking to trolls, right? Again, questioning himself. A tune went off somewhere in the room. Tam assumed it was a phone. He had to laugh internally at the idea of trolls carrying cell phones. The smaller one stepped away as he pulled a phone from his pocket. We have company. Upstairs. Ignore them, Magnus said. Tolan answered. Better to turn them away than to feed their insistence. Magnus gave him a harsh growl. Then go turn them away, and take Poot with you. The smaller one stomped his foot. No, I want to see it shift. Go. Magnus pointed to the stairs. Tam watched as the two went up the steps. The wood creaked under their weight. Magnus placed the talk back around Tam's neck. Best to keep you quiet, just in case. Once again he was mute, unable to move. They all waited for a signal. 2 stomps on the floor. Magnus smiled. All clear. Now we can start again. And you can tell me where it is. The basement door opened, and Tam expected to hear Tolan and Poot come down the stairs. So did Magnus and the other two. What Tam didn't expect to hear was a swamp sound and another thud. He could only focus on Magnus as the troll roared at something to Tam's right. He brandished his pipe, and Tam could see he ran out of his frame. All Tam did was heard sounds of some sort of battle. He heard the cries of pain and more of that odd swamp noise. But then, nothing. Nothing. Until he recognised her face. He'd watched her in step dancing class, all while dreaming of asking her out, but also feeling embarrassed because she was a good few inches taller than him. It was pronounced Owen, actually. McGill, the lead dancer. Only, instead of being dressed in jeans, she wore what looked like leather pants, boots, and a tight-fitting vest. She had her red hair pulled back, and sticking up over her shoulder, he could see a quiver and arrows. She had a bow in her hands, and she looked like a cosplayer. He blinked as she put her arm through the bow, and then rested it upon her. She pulled a cloth from her pocket. This cloth she used to remove the talk. Once it was off, Tam gasped and bit back a yell. He had no idea what was going on, but he was sure as hell that he didn't want to show any weakness in front of Owen. He followed her with his eyes to one of the slumped trolls as she retrieved a long knife. That's when he saw all of them were on the floor, some with arrows protruding from their backs. He tried to say. She put a finger to his lips. Shh. First, we get out of here. Owen stepped away for a few seconds before he was lowered to the floor. He didn't stand because his ankle gave and fell with a thud and rattle of chains to the hard floor. Sorry, my bad, Owen said, as she scrambled to his side. She had a key in her hands, and, still holding the cloth, used it to unlock the shackles from his wrists, and then remove the chains from his ankles. Tam blinked hard as he looked at the burns on his wrists. What happened to me? Iron. It's what the talk is made of. Something the unseelie can't tolerate. No more questions. We don't have time. They're not dead. Tam, my arrows can't kill them. It takes a lot more power than that. So, let's get you on your feet. My ankle. I know. She picked her way over the downed trolls and gathered everything back in his backpack and grabbed the bodhran. Tam wiped his mouth and came away with blood on his hand as she put the drum back in its case. Thank goodness they hadn't destroyed that. It was important to him. And with those items on her shoulders, she made her way back to him. She put the backpack on his back, and he kept his mouth shut at the pressure against his bruised shoulders. She helped him push himself up on wobbly legs. He put his weight on his good ankle as she moved under the shoulder of the bad side and wrangled the case strap over his good shoulder. Her height practically lifted him up, and he stumbled as the room tilted at the fairly wrong angle. I always wanted to put my arm around you, Tam winced. Why did I say that out loud? Shh, you're in pain. You've had the talk on too long. Let's go. But how? I'll explain everything. Please, Tam, we have to go. I had the element of surprise. But if we stay here and linger, and they wake... She didn't have to tell him twice. He took in a deep breath, moaned at the pain in his chest, and worked with her to get up the steps. They emerged in a hallway, and he looked to the right. He saw two doors that said "Ladies and Gentlemen." Beyond them was another door, but Owen led him in the opposite direction to a larger door, an exterior door. They pushed it open together and stepped out into the cool night air. Shivering, he tried to move with her down the sidewalk. He looked back to see where they'd been, the place he was in. He had no idea where he was, but it wasn't in Cambridge. A very, very loud roar stopped them both. "Crap," Owen said. "I'd hoped they'd stayed out longer, but Magnus, he's a strong one. You know him?" "I know of him. I need you to move to my back." "What?" She sighed and stepped out from under his shoulder, and then presented her back to him and knelt down. "Put your arms around my neck." "I'm not sure." "Swallow that human pride. Do it." He did it, the muscles in his shoulders screaming the whole time. Instantly, something shifted, and it wasn't him. His dizziness increased, and he almost let go until a voice in his mind said, "Hold on." That's when he realized he wasn't on Owen's back anymore, but astride a huge red mare. It turned its head to look at him and snort, and he grabbed hold of her mane. Seconds, it was just seconds, before the door to the building slammed open and Magnus appeared. The horse took off in a flash. That's the end of the part 2 of Morrigan. Thank you for listening, and many blessings.